Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. Welcome to the webinar. We'll get started in just a second, but I want to make sure that everyone is able to use the chat features and the question features. So be sure that when you send a chat, you send it to all attendees so everyone can see your questions and see what you need to say here in the chat feature. Thank you all for jumping on. We're super excited. We have two great panelists here today, Erin and Jenna. Jenna from Google and Erin from our side over on LocalIQ. We're really excited. This is going to be a super hot topic. We'll have a lot to cover. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So a couple of housekeeping logistics to get us started. I answered this question in the question box, but I will remind you all this webinar will be recorded. So don't worry about taking notes or anything. You're going to get the materials in your inbox later today after the webinar. And also know that all of our webinars and this one as well will be easily found on our YouTube channel. So definitely check us out there if you want to check out the recording later on. So it will be recorded. And like I said, make sure that you stick around for the Q&A segment and submit those questions into the question box. We'll have Erin and Jenna stay on. We've had some great sessions the past few webinars with those questions, so definitely hold on to those and stick around for that at the end of the webinar. So some of you guys might already be familiar with LocalIQ. Some might be totally new to us. Some might be already working with us or working with our sister brands, WordStream and ReachLocal. So just to warm everybody up to who LocalIQ is here, we're an all-in-one marketing platform that helps small businesses find, convert, and keep customers. So we marry proprietary marketing technology and top-notch customer service to help you see results. Now, a lot of folks often ask me where you can find out about LocalIQ and our sister brands like WordStream or ReachLocal, how you can learn more about what we'll be talking about today. Definitely check us out on our websites, on our blogs. We cover all of the topics that we talk about in our webinars, super in-depth on our blogs. Also check us out and be sure to follow us on social. So we have our LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Definitely follow us, like us on there. We post a lot of our blogs and webinars and events on there as well, so you can stay up to date with the latest and greatest. So a little bit about me. I am your presenter and host today. My name is Susie. It's wonderful to meet you all. Again, thank you all for joining today. I am a content marketing specialist at LocalIQ, where I write educational content on pay-per-click advertising, SEO, marketing, social media, everything under the marketing sun. And how I got into this position was I actually started as a digital marketing consultant on the WordStream side. So I was coaching clients through those best practices across the marketing board. So I took that knowledge and now applied it to the content that we create on LocalIQ today. A little fun fact about me is I'm based out in Boston, and this is actually my favorite season right now. I love to go skiing on the weekends, so that's what I do outside of work. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'll pass it off to our presenters.
Sure, and I'm Erin Rose, and I think the slide will flip forward in just a second. Perfect. So I am the Senior Director of Partner Development and Strategic Sales here at LocalIQ. And I've been doing everything digital marketing for a little over 16 years, and I've gotten to work with a bunch of amazing businesses, from people with one truck running businesses from the ground up to multi-billion-dollar brands like Nike. And I think I've worn almost every hat that you can in the space. So I've been in sales and service and development and design and analytics and on the engineering side, and I'm super excited about all of it. The fun fact about me is that I'm the opposite of Susie, right? So I don't want to be in the snow. I want to be where it's warm. I am on a mission to visit 100 beaches, and I am currently at number 68. So definitely in the chat, let me know what beach maybe I haven't been to where I should go next. Jenna?
Yeah, thank you, Erin. I'm with you on the beachfront. I'm sorry, Susie. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I am an agency development manager here at Google, and I work with LocalIQ and some of our other partners where I really help them scale and future-proof their agency. I work on a lot of things like what I'm going to present today. I basically share these insights with our agencies and partners as well. Prior to this, I was an account strategist here at Google, where I worked with through our agencies, but with some of the top clients. So some big names. And then I also put together a Google digital marketing and Ecom certificate as a subject matter expert for Coursera. prior to my life at Google, I was an account executive working on Wall Street, and I did a lot of client-facing work. So I really love working with some of our partners and kind of like a consulting type role. I am based in Los Angeles. Previous to this, I was in San Francisco and New York.
Wonderful. Thank you, Erin and Jenna, so much for joining us today. Super excited to hear what you guys have to say. So a little bit about what we'll be covering. So we're going to go through, just take things back to the foundations of Google Ads, how things have started, what the customer journey looks like today, and how that's going to impact the future of Google search and Google Ads advertising. And then we'll hear from Jenna and get some great insights on the future of Google and what the Google search space looks like now. And then we'll kind of talk about how this can impact your business and what you can do next with this information. So to warm everybody up, I love to keep people on their toes in webinars, and I want you guys to type in the chat, what is the first thing that you do when you need to find information about something? Maybe you need to find out a business location, or need to find a certain store, or read about something, a new concept to you. Where do you go? Do you ask a friend, maybe hop on the phone? Do you hit the phone book like the old days, or do you go on the Google search? I would imagine, and I'm looking at the responses here, a lot of folks are typing in Google search. That's super exciting. A lot of folks, yeah, it all starts with the search. If you need to go somewhere and learn about a new topic, you need to go online and find out online these days. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, so I hope that wasn't a huge surprise for everybody being on this webinar, but yeah, absolutely, everything starts with search. And on the next slide, the stat that we always cite for this is the percentage of people that start with that, right? So 93% of online experiences begin with the search engine. And I always think it's funny to think back not that long ago. If you think, whenever you grew up, when you had a question, you didn't get to start with search. You had to go to like the library, right? The other running joke that we always say is that Google knows, and Google knows because we tell Google everything. So like that weird spot on your arm that you don't know what it is, you tell Google that before you tell anybody else. And on a more serious side of things, when we research in different verticals, we know that, for example, in the medical space, if somebody gets a serious diagnosis, before they tell a loved one, before they tell their partner, their friends, their family, in the parking lot, they're immediately going to Google and searching to find out information. So everything in our world now starts with search. So I think the next thing that we want to talk about is kind of what is trending. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So we know everything starts with a search. Everybody's online looking for information day in and day out. But what does that mean today? Because that's totally different than, like I said, back in the day when you needed to find out about a business and you would go into a phone book or something like that. So it's not only just starting on Google search now, but it's all across the internet. We have access to the internet in so many different ways. For example, I heard that YouTube was actually on the rise in terms of a search engine. Is that true, Erin?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think a lot of people have sort of kept in their minds the way YouTube initially released as the funny cat video platform. I think that's how a lot of us have that in their head. But really, YouTube is the second largest search engine. Search has evolved a lot. You used to be able to get to the end of the search results, if you guys remember that, right? That was the thing that you could do. But search is more all-encompassing. And so if you're not on platforms like YouTube, you absolutely should be. YouTube is approaching or just exceeded 2 billion users. And that's one of those numbers that's so big that you can't really get your head around, right? So think about it this way. We just did the Super Bowl. YouTube is like 4 or 5 Super Bowls worth of attention every single day that's happening. And so if you're not there, you absolutely need to be. It's a platform that's matured and grown up. The #1 search for YouTube is how to. People are going there to find out how to accomplish things.
Wow. So it's not only on the rise, it's already a top dog. So if you're not using YouTube or on YouTube yet, you definitely want to be. That's good to know. Now, that brings up another point, though. Not only are we on devices where we can watch YouTube videos or make Google search like a laptop or a phone, but we also have these home devices and personal devices inside our houses now. Like, people are often searching via voice search or using home assistant devices to look up things. So would that impact strategy? Do you think that's going to be a bigger trend? And do we have to cater to both typed out searches and voice searches?
Yeah, it's absolutely something to keep in mind. So I recently took the plunge on smart wiring my house. So I got the Google Mesh Network set up for Nest, and it's been really interesting to see seeing the cultural changes that have happened in my house. Right, so I have a daughter who's 17, and she's discovered all sorts of interesting features that these home assistants will do. For example, the animal of the day. You would not believe what an incredible like sort of moment that becomes. She wants to hear the animal of the day, like, and it's a thing. But then more specifically, right, people want to understand how is voice search impacting business? And the first stat that I bumped into was like, well, what percentage of voice search is business related? And it's really only about 10%, right? A lot of the activity that's happening on voice search is going to be people asking for the weather, people setting reminders, people asking for their calendar. There's a lot of different features that go in. And when we heard that stat, our first thought was like, well, maybe it's not really impacting it that much, right? If I ask for a plumber near me, voice search is only going to be able to give you one listing. But what you need to think about is the comprehensive customer journey, and that it can start with voice, right? People are going to be seamlessly switching between devices, going from voice to phone to desktop, depending on how complex the search is. So it's absolutely something that you need to be factoring into your overall strategy.
Okay, wow, definitely is more common than I thought. So we know that we want to cater to both voice searches and typed out searches, but what do you think the best way to approach that is? I know we have the option of the organic results, right, with search engine optimization, or doing some pay-per-click ads on the search engine results page or in the voice search results as well. Do you think that one is better than the other? Do they work hand in hand together? What would you say would be the best approach?
Yeah, the headline there is that they absolutely work hand in hand, right? So if you think about the homepage of Google, that's the most valuable real estate in the world. So if you haven't pulled back and done a search without the intention of actually finding information, like, you should absolutely do that today. Put in just a search and look at the composition of the Google homepage, right? And see what the different pieces are. See what pieces are paid ads and see what pieces are organic. The two absolutely work hand in hand. I would say that think about how you want to activate on that for your business. Search is something that you can turn the faucet on and you can immediately get traffic for that's high quality and relevant. SEO is going to take a little bit longer, right? It's more like climbing a mountain. You need to think about your content strategy. You're going to make changes, and it's going to take longer for those to come to fruition. So they work hand in hand, but one is fast and one is steady, is a slow and steady approach.
Wow, okay, so it definitely sounds like we should be doing both, and they're friends, they're not enemies.
Absolutely.
Great.
So we're going to jump in and talk a little bit about the fundamentals. And if you'll just go ahead to the next slide. And I'll tell you the reason that we start talking about the fundamentals is that there's a lot of, every year, new shiny things. There's niche topics that people jump into, and we're happy to address all of those. But what we find whenever we do comprehensive analysis for businesses, and we'll certainly talk about how you can get one of those at the end of this, most people aren't getting the fundamentals right. And this is actually how you get ahead of the curve and get ahead of your competition, is making sure that all of your foundational elements are right. So the first thing that I want to talk about on the next slide is something that you've heard before. And I'm going to start with something you know so that we can get to something that probably you don't know or aren't looking at, and that's inflation. So you've heard inflation. Basically, it just means that your money isn't going as far. And on the next slide, you can see probably the best example of this, right? Which is the price of gas. So just so that you're still going, if you'll hop into your chat and tell me, what did you pay for gas in high school? You go back one slide, thanks. So this goes from 2000 to 2019. If you're on the East Coast or the West Coast, these numbers probably like make you sick because you're paying probably double than that. But this is what the price of gas is. For me, I think I paid maybe like 60 cents for gas in high school. And I have a Super Sport Camaro. It's another thing that I'm into. So I pay a lot of money for gas. And then on the next slide, this is what the impact of inflation ultimately is. What I want you to think about is that over time, you had to put more money in your car to fill up your tank. If you had not adjusted to the way that the market changed, you just wouldn't go as far. If you still were putting 20 bucks in your car to fill up your tank, you would not be able to go as far as you would before, right? So the market changed, and just intuitively you had to react. And so what we want to do is compare this global trend to how it fits to search specifically. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at that. So what I want you to think about is how the change in cost per click has also changed over time. So some people on here have probably been running search all the way back from when it started. But if you think about back in 2006 when you were running search, that's pre-iPhone. And you can put this in the chat too. Like what was your average cost per click? Or if you don't know what it started with, what's your average cost per click now? You can see that it's gone up, it's gone a little bit down. This chart does from 2006 to 2016. And the reason that we cut it off there is that when you get into 2020, it starts to fracture, right? So we see that by vertical, cost per clicks kind of go all over the place. If you look at legal terms or insurance terms, if that's not a vertical that you're in, you'd be scared, right? Some of those cost per clicks are like $50 versus there's other terms where they're still low. But ultimately, over time, cost per click has gone up across the board over verticals, and that should not be shocking, right? But on the next slide, what I want you to sort of think about is that the term that we use in talking about that is click inflation. So talked about inflation at the beginning, but the new term you might not have heard is click inflation. And it's just like what happened with your car. If you have not adjusted your budget since you started your campaign, you may not know this, right? But it's just that your money just isn't going quite as far as it used to. And so this is the fundamental call to action, right? The market has changed. And if you're not reacting to the market is reacting to you. And so you're probably getting less than you did before. And we want you to think about what that means. So on the next slide, here's how click inflation applies to the market overall. So if you're not familiar with this term, impression share is really, really important because that relates to how you relate to everyone else in your space. It's the percentage of impressions that your ad received compared to the total possible impressions. Okay, so what does that really mean? It means that there's a pie, right, of available impressions, and your impression share is how big a piece of pie you get. And if you didn't increase your budget, most likely your impression share has gotten less and less and less, which means it's less likely that somebody sees your ad, and that's bad for business, right? You want to make sure that you're getting your fair share of impression share, right? So on the next slide, here's just a visualization of ultimately what that looks like when we were talking about pie. You've got your market segment, you've got the eligible traffic that's ultimately available, and then you have your wedge of the pie, right? That's the impression share. And if you're the person who's in the back end, on the next slide, if you're in the back end of Google and you're not looking at impression share, these are absolutely columns that you can enable and take a look, right? At the AdWord level, at the keyword level, you can see what your impression share is. And if you're not aware of what that stat is, that's one of those KPIs that you should be paying attention to. So on the next slide, the big question that everybody asks once they get here is, what should your impression share be? And it's not going to be a surprise that I'm going to say it depends, right? It depends on a lot of things. It depends on what your available budget is. It depends on what your market is. It depends on what your goals are. But if your impression share is 10%, it needs to be higher. Right? I would say like really broad range. If you really have to nail me down, you need to be in at least the 40 to 70% range. And if you're not there, think about what things you can change in order to get there, right? So then the question becomes on the next slide, like how do you solve for this, right? What's the budgeting, the technical ins and outs of how you're going to get there? If you know that click inflation is happening, you know you want to secure more impression share, you need to figure out where that money is going to come from. So you need to look at what is your traditional media spend versus your digital advertising spend. It's almost become ubiquitous that digital advertising is more common than traditional media, at least in certain verticals, so definitely think about that. And then think about how are you getting efficiency in spend? So are you using technology in order to get more efficient spend? And then what are your cost centers, right? Like if you're managing things in-house versus are you outsourcing? Do you have a cost center that you need to deal with that you could potentially be using that money for? And then I'll just do two slides quickly on our value proposition, and then I promise I will turn it to Jenna, and you're going to get to hear all of the cool stuff from Google. The way that we're able to operate and help businesses is that we've built a platform that works in conjunction with Google. We've built that platform. We started in 2004, and we've been iterating it, and so it's gotten really, really good. And it uses a variety of different things, right? So it's conversion-based optimization. We have something proprietary that we call our reach maximization algorithm that makes sure that you're spending the right budget all the way through the month. And then, of course, we have humans that are working in conjunction with that platform. And what I found is that I would show this slide to people and it didn't hit the way that I wanted. Because ultimately what I'm saying is we have awesome tech and it helps you get a better cost per click and better conversion rates and better click-through rates and all of the things, but it didn't hit for people. So I tried to wrap up with this next slide to nail the point home. Because what I could have showed you on this slide is, hey, whenever we migrate things from a hand-managed campaign to a LocalIQ tech platform, the cost per clicks go down, the conversion rates go up, and everything is glorious, and you'd certainly expect to see that. What I wanted you to see is what our platform does so that it doesn't feel like a black box. Because we're a large company, a lot of times we'll do migrations and we'll pull hand-managed campaigns, we'll import them over to our tech platform. And what the bottom layer shows you is if you have somebody who's really on the ball, you know, you're going to pay them a lot of money, you give the guy a PS5 and he's on the ball, he's making changes, he's going to make, call it 300 changes to the account. Our platform will do close to 10,000 changes. Right? It does things that a human can't do. It's going and making very granular changes. It'll know that, hey, this specific keyword and this very targeted geo on mobile devices, if we bid to page position 3 is more likely to get a conversion, so we're gonna upbid that term. And it goes in and makes those granular changes. But like every bad science fiction movie you've ever seen, you never want the robot running off on its own, right? You need to make sure that the robot and the human are working hand in hand, hence the hand on the slide. That's the unique offering that we have in space. There are some platforms that are human only. There are some platforms that are tech only. Ours is that we've been iterating it since 2004 and we're marrying the robot and the human together. So if you're looking ways to get more efficient cost per click and you want to have that evaluated, certainly that's something you should look at. But I will stop with our pitch part and then I'm going to turn it over to Jenna and let's hear everything that's the latest and greatest from Google.
Thank you so much, Erin. That was fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the future of search, at least from the Google perspective. And I am, just as a refresher, I'm the agency development manager where I work with partners like LocalIQ to help them grow and scale their clients. If you want to go to the next slide. Google is now 23 years old, which is crazy. And this is a time of real incredible change and opportunity from my perspective. And Google is no different. In just the past few years, over 500 million people started using connected devices for the first time. And in that time, we've introduced completely new ways to search. So throughout the next 25 minutes or so, I'm going to talk through what that looks like and how we've really evolved. But before we get into that, I want to highlight on the next slide that LocalIQ is a top 3% Google Ads partner. This was actually just announced this month. We revamped our partner program and made it much more exclusive. So only top 3% of agency partners in the entire country are able to get the Premier Partner badge. As you can see here, it definitely comes with different benefits, including education and insights to ensure the LocalIQ team and their clients are up to date with product knowledge and these industry insights similar to what I'm sharing with you all now. Also just support with technical issues, getting their executive team involved, providing feedback, and then also recognition and rewards. So promotional offers along with rewards for some of the successes they've had with clients. So it's a really exciting opportunity I wanted to highlight before we dive into things. But okay, to go back to search, do you remember when Google looked like this? This is 1998. Google was just a search engine and only about 4% of the world had access to the internet, which is crazy. Now, when we look at today, almost 60% of the world has access to the web, where 92% of these access via mobile. And that little computer corner we used to have in our home is now a supercomputer in your pocket. It's been 15 years since the smartphone came out, which is so hard to believe. And even that, I think it was 1992 that there was the Palm Pilot, which I think technically might be the first smartphone, but it had the touchscreen features. But it really sparked a revolution in the way that we behave, and mobile has changed everything. Users are searching more than ever, which Erin was touching on, and their needs continue to evolve. So today we have smartphones in our pockets, smart TVs in our living room, and computers on our wrists and in our cars. And to give you some perspective, in 2017, there were 8 billion connected devices around the world. That's more devices than there are people. But then if we look now in the last year, that figure has come to 27 billion. That means we're growing by 1 million devices every hour, which is absolutely insane. So why is this important to you as an advertiser? The reason is that this growth in connectivity is having really a dramatic impact on how we behave as consumers and how we interact with brands. For example, every single day, 15% of searches made Google hasn't seen before. Can you imagine how many new searches that is? Think about, for example, how many times do you turn to Google for information a day? And Google gets billions of searches every single day. So every day, 15% of these searches is something that Google hasn't seen before. And as our world has changed really drastically since 2020, it's not a surprise that consumer behaviors have as well. We are all turning to search even more now for our daily needs. Next slide. Yeah, we are now turning to search even more now for our daily needs. We want to get ideas of where to go, what to buy. We want to support local businesses more and find new ways to be smart with our money. We're not only using search to get information anymore, not to just answer our questions, but now it's being used for exploration as well. So how are you ensuring that you're showing up while people explore, not just while they're searching for what they're looking for? The consumer journey is now more unpredictable, where people are discovering, researching, and considering brands. So now that life has gone even more virtually, I'm sure we've all gone down a hole where we're sitting on our phones on the couch, we're researching 10 different brands for a new product we want to buy. Maybe it's a couch. I just bought a home, so I'm looking at couches, mops, things for my home that I would have typically gone in to look at it in person. And then with shopping previously being done mostly in person, we used to be limited to the 2 brands available at our local store. But now with the internet and the pandemic, we have every single brand at our fingertips online. So it's not a surprise that 75% of consumers in the US have tried different brands and websites. And this change will have a huge impact and already has on our post-pandemic marketing strategies. And we see CMOs in our industry agreeing with this evolution. And then now that we know that consumers are getting more complicated and it's happening very quickly, 2, that e-commerce has grown more since 2020 than it has in the past decade, with no plans for consumers to change this behavior. And 3, that YouTube and on-demand video has skyrocketed with over 1 billion hours of YouTube watched every single day. And like Erin mentioned, Google is the largest search engine and YouTube is the second. It's really vital for brands to embrace what we call the digital transformation across their organization. So how can you do that, and what exactly does that mean? So data and automation that uses data and signals in real time at scale. This is something LocalIQ does in partnership with Google, but this allows brands to basically capture demand and drive growth. And we see a 15% increase in purchase intent for brands that do this and really have embraced the future. To do this, you really need privacy first, data driven, and the use of automation. Next slide. To meet demand in real time. So this is something that Google can help you do, and I'll dive into the details a little further. So this happens through measurement and automation. Next slide. So without going too into the weeds, when I say privacy first measurement, we're talking about utilizing first party data, conversion modeling, and privacy preserving technologies. So automation and machine learning only works as well as the data you feed it. So an example of conversion modeling is a new enhanced conversion beta we have, which LocalIQ has access to since they are a premier partner. And some examples of first party data is importing your offline data from your CRM back into Google, or importing a list of past purchasers or people who may have added your product to cart, then using that data to target those users again, or even allowing Google's automation to use the data to find people that have a similar profile as someone who has purchased your product or added it to cart previously. So your first party data is extremely powerful and can propel your success on Google, especially with the changes in privacy in the landscape. So I know I've looked at a pair of sneakers and then start to see an ad for another cute pair of sneakers of the similar style that I of course end up purchasing. I know this means that the brand has strong marketing and is using their strategy and their first party data in order to drive additional sales for their business. So A little further in the presentation, I'll also touch a bit on the automated products, but on the next slide, we'll talk about how Ecom has hit 1 trillion this year, which means even more digital ad spend, where 2022 will nearly 2x its pre-pandemic level of in 2019, and will add another 550 billion by 2025. So the pandemic boosted online spend by 183 billion over the past year, and it has permanently accelerated e-commerce as we know today, with Americans on track to spend $1 trillion online, which is a record amount. In the first 2 months of this year, consumers have already spent 121 billion online, 34% higher than the same time last year. So this is insane. So the e-commerce spend has increased drastically, and there's no plan for it to stop. And most shoppers research a product on Google before they buy. So we'll see how that. Remember when I was mentioning that people are discovering, researching, and considering brands more than ever? Well, Google is the most used website for product research, even more than Amazon, by a whopping 48% on mobile, where most are searching. So we know that people are coming to Google for not just, like I said, not just searching for what they're looking for, but also just researching and finding products and new brands. So I'll hop into also just going into the search ecosystem and how it's changing. I want to take a step back. So if we go 2 slides forward. So I want to take a step back to think about how users search on Google. So these searches are fueled by a variety of individual contexts and needs. So when people search, a lot of contextual signals get passed along, like the time of day of their search, the location, the device. All these signals come together and make each search unique. And to reach each user with the right message at the right time, you want to be sure you can understand and target these signals as best as possible. This creates more complexity in account management, and some of these signals can't be optimized for manually. This is why automated targeting is really the best solution to efficiently account for and optimize against all the available signals in order to reach performance goals for a brand. And then search advertising has really changed in large part due to machine learning. So over the years, we've incorporated more and more machine learning or automation into our products. Can we hop to the next slide? Yeah. On this slide, you can see some examples of our automation solutions I mentioned earlier I would touch on. So for example, responsive search ads, where advertisers input multiple ad copies and then it automatically customizes your ad based on the options you input and what the user is searching to ensure your ad is the most relevant to them. So Google's automated solutions basically allow to make sure that that users can find exactly what they're looking for when they're searching for it. And this is true for most of our machine learning solutions. If we hop onto the next slide, with us leaning more into automation, we have also included improvement in our control and transparency launches. We are moving to show queries instead of keywords as a signal. This means instead of just optimizing towards a keyword like handbag, if someone searches for something like sleek, classy, black handbag, we are looking at the entire query versus just the keywords. And now, even though our ads are more automated, you can now review the queries Google is using for your brand and optimize your website future ad copy and more. And this is something that LocalIQ works with and does a lot with us. And since many of the search queries, next slide, since many of the search queries are misspelled, in 2020, we actually launched a new algorithm that learns from less common and unique spelling mistakes. So for example, on the slide, it shows if someone searches average home cost, Google can see that the user is likely looking for average home cost. So since search is query-based, it's important that we understand what a user is searching, so then your brand can accurately solve for what they're looking for. So to summarize, what did we learn? So I think the main highlights are connected devices have gone up from 8 billion to 27 billion since 2017. 15% of searches on Google are new every single day. And with these shifts, along with the pandemic, there's been a dramatic impact on how we behave as consumers and how we interact with brands. The consumer journey has become even more complex and unpredictable, where people are turning to search to explore, research, and plan. It's vital for brands to embrace what we call the digital transformation across the organization through first-party measurement and automation. This is even more true for e-commerce, which is expecting to hit 1 trillion this year, where 2022 will nearly 2x its pre-pandemic level in 2019. And Google is the most used website for product research. And as fantastic as Google tools may be, next slide, you know your customers better than anyone else. So, and having the opportunity to engage with them and delight them in more meaningful ways than ever before. So how are you working with LocalIQ to ensure your brand is prepared and that you're a part of this digital transformation? Thank you so much for having me join. I think now I'll pass it back to Susie.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jenna. That was super informational. I can't believe some of those stats you pulled. They were super surprising. It's just crazy how the Google search space and Google in general is growing. So that was amazing. So let's kind of wrap it up with some final thoughts before we jump into the Q&A. This was a ton of information. So again, remember, definitely check out our other webinars on YouTube to learn about how to get started on Google Ads, or just to refresh on some of the information we just found. This will be recorded and on there too. So just the key takeaway that I think everyone should kind of keep in the back of their mind from all of the info we saw today is that clearly Google Ads and search is more important than ever. So you're probably not giving it the time and attention that it really needs. When we're constantly moving in this space and marketing, and there's so many new products and new options out there, it's hard to know what's right for you, which we also did a webinar on that. But it's also important to stick to the basics and make sure that you're giving your business the time and attention it deserves to be showing up on the web. So always make sure that you have those backup plans in place to cover your own butt, to make sure that your business and your brand or your clients show up on the SERP space and in the different areas of Google products. Those stats definitely speak for themselves. There's just a huge untapped audience that is out there. So with that being said, if you feel like you maybe could use a little bit more attention to put towards your Google strategy, feel free to hit yes in this poll. If you want to just learn more about how LocalIQ can help you even more if you're already working with us, or if you want to you're totally new and don't know where to start, think of this opting into yes as session 0, where you can get all of your questions answered on how we can help you see the most success possible on Google with our great partnership with Google here. So definitely hit yes there. We'll keep this poll up until the end of the webinar. But with that being said, there have been tons and tons of questions flowing in for Erin and Jenna. So we'll keep this poll up, and I'm going to hop into some of the questions. Thank you all for throwing in your questions in here. There was a ton coming in, super exciting stuff. So we'll have a ton to talk about. So again, anyone, asking how we can get reached out to, or, has more questions that personally apply to them, definitely hit yes in this poll to have someone directly reach out to you. So with that being said, Jenna, Erin, everyone is dying to hear your answers to their questions. They loved the presentation. Really great to see all this positive feedback here. The first thing that I want to start with is, Jenna, this one is more directed for you. A lot of folks were asking, if the data would apply to just like a B2C business or a B2B business. Are we thinking globally or more directly in the US? Granted, LocalIQ and our sister brands, we work with other countries outside of the US too, but some people did have some questions about the data. So would you say that the data that you pulled is applicable to both a B2B or B2C situation? It seemed like that to me, but just wanted to clarify some of those things of where you source the data.
And I'm on mute. It only took me an hour to do that. Yeah, so most of the data was pulled for B2C, but it is applicable to B2B. The stats might be a little bit different, but overall the industry has evolved. So these stats are just as, we're seeing the same thing globally, but most of these are specifically pulled for the US and B2C. But yes, this is something we're definitely seeing across the board, because even when consumers are searching, when a business is searching for a B2B brand, they are still using the platform outside. They're using on the online platform, but they're also still researching and planning using search. So the evolution of online and what I call the digital transformation is definitely still relevant globally and for B2B.
Great, thank you for clarifying that, Jenna. And I'll direct a question, give you a little break, Jenna. I have a question here for Erin from Beth. Thank you for asking this, Beth. She asked, what are other KPIs you feel are important when we're talking in Google search strategy? She said impression share and impressions seem lower in importance versus other KPIs that relate directly to a purchase in the sales funnel.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair, right? So if you're looking for the God metric, then it's going to be conversion rate, I think is probably the best, or cost per conversion. So, I mean, ultimately at the very bottom or the very like top of your analysis is going to be what is your return on ad spend. And I mean, you can get that all the way down to what is your return on ad spend minus your product cost so that you're getting ultimate profit. So marketing ultimately is the proposition that you're able to print dollars at 90 cents. And so you want to make sure that the engine that you've created is profitable. And so that is the ultimate sort of North Star metric that you have. The reason that we zoomed in on impression share and click inflation is what we've seen is that people's engines just aren't going as far as they used to. But things like conversion rate and return on ad spend are going to be the absolute starting places. What we find whenever we do those initial analyses for people is that a lot of people don't have their analytics and their system set up in place to have those numbers. So if you're not right now, for everybody on the call, if you're not able to go in and go, okay, what's my budget, my average cost per click, how much traffic did I get, and then what is my conversion rate, and then what is my my cost per conversion, and being able to calculate what your ultimate return on ad spend is for your search program, that is your absolute first starting point. And then you should line that up with, you know, what are your goals? Like if you're only getting 20 sales, like how many sales do you need or want to hit this year? And then figure out what changes you need to make in order to get there.
Great.
Yeah, and just to, just to expand on that too, Erin, you're absolutely right. And I think when we talk about measurement here at Google, our language around it has evolved. We're really focusing on return on ad spend. We're also thinking about like, to your point, some clients don't know, or brands don't know the return on ad spend. So helping them figure out how to calculate that, what their margins are for each product, how they really think about it. But yeah, as we think about measurement, I think return on ad spend is definitely the way we're measuring here at Google and how our measurement has evolved.
Awesome. Thank you so much to both of you for those super thorough answers. I think that clarified a lot. And since you kind of both took on that one, I have another one that could be directed to either of you. This is great from Andrew here. He asked, you know, his company is ranked #1 in organic search. Is it still worth doing Google ads? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear from both of you.
I'll jump in first if that's okay. As you might imagine, I do think it's worth doing both. And it would be interesting to know if you rank number one, do you rank #1 for all of the different terms that you want to? If it's for the specific cluster that you want, there's probably new clusters that you should dig into for SEO. The reason that I suggest that you should do both is the vocabulary word would be page dominance. There is a pride that comes to your business whenever you show up on all of the places. So when somebody searches for that term, when you're the #1 listing in both search and organic, and you show up in the map stack, and then later if they don't immediately visit you, later they see you on social, or they hit you on retargeting ads, and then they see you on YouTube, that's called page dominance, and you end up being the obvious choice. So think about like the last thing that you researched for. There was probably one company that had 10,000 Google reviews, and they were in every single place. And instinctively, our brains are looking for shortcuts to evaluate who the best thing is. And when somebody sees all of that, it's really easy to pick your business as the winner.
Yeah, and I get this question a lot with some of the clients and agencies we work with, and absolutely, because what I touched on earlier too is 15% of the searches are new to Google. So often we surprise clients who think that they understand what their user or what their customer is searching for, and a lot of the time they do for a portion of it. But how do you know what to anticipate and what to go after if you don't? If you're not bidding for words that you might not think will show up. So some of the automation will do that. So like the automation has some insight as far as like a potential customer has searched for these things previously. This is their background. This is what they've purchased prior, and they would be a fit for your business. So that's something that PPC will be able to help with. So Google search, if you're running ads on Google search and it's dynamically showing your ad where it sees fit, you're able to capture that additional 15% that you just wouldn't have insight to with just organic.
Awesome. Thank you both for clarifying that. That was super helpful. Definitely clear that you want to be doing a little bit of both. We have a ton of questions still coming in. Someone and a couple of folks have actually asked questions alluding to this. So this is another one that, either of you feel free to jump in here. We saw that Google is growing so much, right? There's a huge untapped audience, like I had said, on there. But what about folks that maybe have a little bit of a narrower audience where they are afraid of maybe risking that wasted spend on people who aren't necessarily in their specific niche audience? Do you guys have any recommendations on how to approach that, or any sort of like targeting tips, things like that?
Do you want to go first this time, Jenna, or do you want me to jump in?
Sure, I can jump in. First party data would be my first recommendation, is to say, if you're nervous to jump in and you are niche, especially true for, someone mentioned B2B earlier, for B2B businesses, your first party data or a list of past customers or list of past customers that have engaged, maybe downloaded a newsletter, done something, engaged with your brand that show that they're likely someone who would purchase before. I would start there, target, not just retarget those people, but Google will create similar audiences based on those lists, and you can use up to 5 years of data. So if you go back and use your past purchasing information, that's where I would start. And I think you're then focused on your niche, and also just utilizing partners like LocalIQ who can do the industry deep dives, get those insights, and really understand your specific niche business.
And yes, so I would echo that, right? It sounds like that you probably want to do an analysis, right? And so that's something we can help you with, or you can do it yourself. But it starts with, like, so for example, for your niche audience, do you know what percentage of the market you're already claiming, right? So, and I've seen some super hyper, very specific niches, right, that maybe you are completely dominating in the search space. But if you don't know for sure if you are maxing out your current marketing programs and then those numbers are already effective, then that's your starting point. There's almost always, there's more money on the table with something that's already working that you could dig into. Also, think about incremental testing into stuff, right? So you don't feel like that you need to jump into the deep end. For example, when we talk about increasing budgets for specific campaigns, generally we're talking about 10 to 15% incremental changes, right? Like you're slowly expanding and testing into things. And then if it's a brand new product, right? Like, so say that you haven't done YouTube ads before and you're like curious or you're concerned about how that might impact things, then find a test budget, put some parameters around that, figure out how you're going to measure it. You test it, you see if it works. If it doesn't work, you try something else. So you should always think for the year, like, what is the core of your engine, and then what are the new things that you're testing to try to improve it. That way you're not guessing your testing. But I would think that you'd want to start with the market analysis and know for certain how much of it you're claiming as your very first starting point.
Well, those were both fantastic answers, and I definitely second the idea of, just doing a market analysis. There's a lot of folks in here right now actually asking industry-specific questions. Definitely, if you have questions regarding to your specific industry, definitely hit yes in this poll so that you can get personalized answers for you. And there's also great industry-specific benchmarks and resources on our blogs. We have case studies for specific industries, so definitely check those out. Now, on the topic of specific industries, I do have one question to follow up kind of with our last conversation just now from someone here. They asked if, what would you say, could change or impact my strategy if I had maybe a longer sales cycle? Maybe I need to track conversions, but I'm in a certain industry that has a super long sales cycle, so I'm not really going to get, a customer off the initial search. What would you guys say would be like the first thing to look at, or how you would approach that?
I can start here, and then Aaron, I'll pass it to you. I would recommend, we call it the lead to sale journey. So I would look at your entire, without having, I'm going to make some assumptions here and just, so let's say you have a lead that comes in and then your team talks to, or has a call, your sales team has a call with the lead and determines that it's a qualified lead. And then from that step on, then they might become they might close the deal and they might become a customer. Whatever, and then multiple clients often have multiple of these steps. So there might be actually 6 of those steps, but that's a simplified version. We call those micro conversions. So the conversion action would be actually getting that sale, which might take more than 90 days, which is typically for Google Ads, it needs to be under 90 days. It might be more than that, and we see that a lot. Like for B2B, we see that a lot. Typically, we then would recommend, based on the other steps in your journey, we would opt towards one of those. So lead form is kind of the most basic, but how can we move into maybe a qualified lead or whatever those other steps your business has? That would be my recommendation. So focus on something that's in the middle between a closed, that's less than 90 days between a closed sale and a lead form, and optimize towards that when advertising. Erin, I don't know if you have a different perspective.
No, I mean, that's dead on, right? So so you start to break it down into what are those micro conversions, right? So whether that, maybe they downloaded a white paper, maybe they filled out a lead form, maybe they joined one of your webinars, like you're trying to create lots of engagement points along the way. One of the longer sales cycles that we normally see, right, like are these complex B2B campaigns. Maybe you're trying to set up consulting engagements and that sale's going to take you like a year to 18 months. Right? And so there's 2 components to that. One, it's creating campaigns that have micro conversions along the way, and you're building those first party databases so that you can get back in front of those people, but it's figuring out those incremental steps. That would be piece 1. And then, yeah, building the first party data so that you can follow back up with those people, running really long-term retargeting campaigns, and testing into all of those things. But there's not a simple answer for really, really long sales cycles, because at some point the analytics do match out, even if you're looking at that in analytics and looking for the really long tail conversion cycles. So it's about re-engagement, but normally really long sales cycles happen in niche markets. And so being saturated in that space so that you're the default choice and that you're continuing to deliver value on both the organic side and thinking all of your marketing efforts as a comprehensive organism. So I would say take a step back and think about the entire customer journey, right? Like, when does somebody have the need? And then how are you being the obvious choice and giving them value and the right answer every step of the way? Leveraging search, leveraging organic, leveraging YouTube, leveraging every single marketing channel. That's the way that you win with really long sales cycles, because their journey is by definition the most complex.
Great. Those are both great answers. I totally agree with both of you on that, that even though with a longer sales cycle, your visitor might not necessarily directly become a customer right off the bat, it doesn't mean that they're not making other important money-making actions and meaningful actions on your site. So definitely stepping up your tracking game can help you with that. So we have a couple other questions before we wrap up. I'll start with one for Jenna, and then I have one for Erin after. So Jenna, a couple of folks have brought up, so you were kind of talking about how Google is now focusing more on the queries themselves versus the keywords. Is that true? And could you elaborate on that a little bit? You know, keywords, I would assume, definitely still matter, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. They still matter, but we've seen the evolution of keywords. Like we talked about, Google is moving towards recommendations around broad match keywords tailored with automation. So the ability to target more broadly and incorporate all these queries versus, I think previously, as we've seen digital marketing kind of evolve, we started with like exact match of people who are exactly searching for your brand handbag, if that's what you sell, for example. But now we're incorporating, kind of focusing more on this broad match, where you're able to then use automation to tailor it. So what that means is broad match would open up any keyword that might be a fit, but in partnership with your first party data, in partnership with automation, in partnership of what you provide the system and machine learning, it's able to then find your audience rather than us kind of controlling what we think the audience might look like. So it's kind of just an evolution of search and how we've typically done search, and how we've kind of moved machine learning and opened things up so that it's still profitable for the business, but you're able to not just capture demand, but create demand for your product.
Great. Thank you for elaborating on that, Jenna. I appreciate that. And then I'm going to hop over to Erin for this next one from Bill. He asked, he wants to, I know you touched on this a little bit when talking about LocalIQ's marriage of machine learning technology and customer service here, but Bill wants to know a little bit more about how LocalIQ stands out and compares to other competitors in our industry, our own competition. How is LocalIQ different?
Sure. I mean, I guess it's always fun to get to toot your own horn. First, let me just sort of recap the value proposition, right? So there are some people that run hand-managed campaigns for agencies. They have just people that are just running on the platform. That also means that you're more likely to lose institutional knowledge if there's turnover there, right? And then on the other end, you have pure technology platforms. That would be something like Kenshu. And then we try to do something that's different, right? We built a technology that's proprietary. It's in-house. It coordinates with Google to do things that a human can't do. And then we have Google certified experts that are working in conjunction with that technology. And so it's really easy for me to say, hey, our campaigns are better, right? So a couple of proof points for that. Whenever Google ran their quality score award, we won that 3 out of the 4 years that we were running. Quality score has a tremendous impact on the cost per clicks that you're ultimately getting for your campaign. If you'd like to see where the proof is in the pudding, we would love to do an analysis within your specific vertical, right? So with all of our costs baked in, we would be able to show you like, hey, in the industry, what's the average cost per click and what are our campaigns currently getting in terms of cost per click and cost per leads. I think that that's the ultimate way that you want to evaluate a marketing agency, right? You want to know what are the results, and then you want to know how experienced is somebody in that vertical, right? So we're running over 1 million campaigns right now. We have over 100,000 customers. So whatever your vertical is, whatever your business is, we probably already have a long history of campaigns in that area. We can share results on that and put together a program that serves that. But it would be the people, the data, the tech, but most importantly, our value proposition is the results, which is why we have such a high client retention rate.
Great, thank you for explaining that, Erin. So I know we're getting right close to time here, so I'll take this last minute to say thank you all so much for joining. I wish we could answer every single question in here, but of course we don't have the time for that today, so definitely make sure that you hit yes on that poll to get your questions answered directly with a more personalized assessment here. Jenna, Erin, you guys were amazing. Thank you again so much for joining, hopping on and being our guests today. And friendly reminder to check out this webinar on our YouTube channel later. Definitely check out our blogs, check out our social if you want more information or didn't get your question answered today. But with that, I'll give you all back a minute of your time. Thank you so much for joining and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.